All right, what's going on, podcast? We're about to do a little chat with my buddy Greg Benstead. Um, he is currently serving in the U.S. Army. I will confirm that. I'm pretty sure he's serving in the U.S. Army. He's currently stationed in Texas. That's all I can tell you for their highly classified information. But we're about to give him a phone call. He himself has been training for an ultramarathon. I think he has big plans this coming year to run a few ultras. We'll get into more of that with him later. But this is something that I'm starting to train for, and someone who has been a big part of my running career, kind of my early origins. It was kind of me and him back and forth running in middle school, that far back. So we're going to get him on the line, and we're going to talk a little bit about ultra running, his training, his life, and maybe reminisce a little bit about some old times. But without further ado, let's give him an old phone call. Hey, buddy, what's going on?
Not much. How about you, man?
Nothing. Just hanging in there. I actually just woke up from a nap. I've been working third shift.
I feel that, dude.
Yeah. What have you been up to? Obviously, in the service and whatnot.
Yeah, just, Texas living, Texas military living, as fine as it gets. Training everywhere and doing all that stuff.
Yeah. What is your typical day look like?
Honestly, it's as weird as it sounds when I just got back from California. We were there for a month training in the desert and doing all that stuff. But a typical day, I wake up at 02 when I'm here. And, as weird as it sounds, I just get up and I work out at 02 to 04:30, 05. And then I go back to work and go to PT. And then 09 to 1800. Just when regular work is.
I gotcha. Well, I kind of introduced you a little bit already for the podcast, but how would you kind of give yourself a little self-introduction?
Just military, like to train hard, more of a self-motivator. I do a lot of things by myself, but at the same time, we're here to motivate people as well. Anything I can do to, put my name out there, but as well help other people, I will 100% do it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of something that I've appreciated. Just texting back and forth with you last few days, and then I know there was a month ago or so we were doing the same thing. So you've been training for an ultra?
Yeah, that's correct. I've been training since, I want to say, March or April.
You ran a marathon this past year or the year before?
Yeah, this year. That was kind of how the training started. One of the days I was just like, man, I'm really tired of doing the same old on the weekend. So, 2 days before it, I signed up for a marathon. And then a couple days later, I ran it, and it was rough, but, I proved a lot to myself that day, and it was a good time. My legs hurt pretty bad, but it was worth it.
So you actually ran a marathon without actually proper marathon training?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There was no training at all. I was mostly weight training at the time, so it was a good weekend for sure.
That's crazy. But that's kind of I don't know about you. We'll get into kind of your motivation to running ultra, but that's kind of the reason why I personally want to run an ultra. In my mind, these days everybody runs a marathon. Anybody can finish a marathon, maybe not run the entire thing, but you don't exactly need a whole lot of training to actually finish it. And I feel like when it goes to an ultra, that kind of takes it to a more extreme level, and you kind of gotta really like not that's not something everyone finishes. Like people drop out all the time. I don't know what kind of your thoughts are on something like that.
Yeah, that's honestly it's the same way. I think that's why we connect so well is because marathons is just something I do on the weekend for like a training run. Honestly, like I signed up for another one a couple days ago, and it's in 20 days, and I haven't trained at all. But I know I'll do fine because it's not crazy, but it's doable for sure. But ultras are just a different level. Have to be a different monster and a different mindset for sure. And I'm trying to get there every day. But the mindset is definitely like a challenge to me personally because I put off so much earlier on, and I like wasn't being honest with myself, and I put off a different character than what like I actually was. And just being honest with yourself, looking in the mirror and be like, yeah, that's not me. I need to put in work, and that's why I love ultras. Honestly, it's a little different vibe, and a whole different community for sure.
Mm-hmm. Now, is this? Are you gonna specifically train for the ultra? Or obviously, you're gonna have to do a little bit more specific training than just for a marathon. What kind is your approach?
I've been doing 5 or 6 days a week on the trails or on the pavement. Pavement's a little less like fun,
Yeah.
but it sometimes it comes to that because a lot of the distances are crazy long, and some of the trails are only like 15, 20 miles. But yeah, I have a specific training plan that I kind of whipped together for a couple weeks, and it's geared towards the ultras and stuff. But and the end goal is just start winning these things and start putting my name out there and showing people you don't have to come from a rich or athletic background to start winning off these things.
Mm-hmm. And have you signed up for one? Do you have a specific date? Do you kind of have a tentative date that you're kind of shooting for?
So a big one I want to do is the Leadville 100. I went to Leadville this past year. I got a couple training runs, and I found out the environment, and the elevation is definitely a key factor.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, why can't I do the Leadville? The Leadville, you have to get a golden ticket. You have to place at other races to even get in the lottery for that race. So I'm shooting towards like getting in a lottery spot or getting a golden ticket. So I got a couple ultras coming up here in like the beginning of the year that would gear towards the Leadville. The Leadville is in August, I believe, next year. So I'm trying to aim for that one.
And so it's kind of funny. I was thinking about it today. Mine and so I remember you specifically. Not I remember you, like obviously I still know you, but so back in the day in middle school, like that's when we were like the tightest, and we both kind of pushed each other. It was mostly with like the middle school mile and stuff. I remember in 7th grade you edged me out by a few seconds, and then in 8th grade your boy, had to take the cake, but but so I remember back then you were like kind of like elementary school, like you were kind of, if you would consider yourself overweight, maybe still had a little bit of baby fat on, and then you got like super healthy, and there's kind of a big turnaround in your health. Can you kind of run me through kind of what happened there?
Yeah, man, absolutely. So yeah, I think elementary school, like my lowest point in my life was like 5th grade. I think I was a $190 in 5th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was really out of shape. I started going to football practice, and I started, like, puking, and, I never wanted to go. And the one day, I was crying because I was like, Dad, I really don't want to go to practice. I don't want to run. I don't want to do all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, he just takes me aside. He's like, this is not who we raised you to be. You're better than that, and we know damn straight, like, who you are deep down. And that was kind of a turning point. As weird as it is, I was like 10 or something, and all of a sudden, I remember that day vividly, and I started doing Weight Watchers, and my parents started encouraging me. My dad took me on my first run when I was in 6th grade. It was just a 3-miler, like a 5K.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to cry. I felt like I was going to die. I sat there on the couch, and I was like, I don't ever want to do that again. Screw that. Like, I hate running. I'm not a fan.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't know what drew me to keep going, and my dad just kept waking me up at I think it was 5 a.m. and I was in 7th grade. And he woke me up at 5 a.m. every day, and we would go running. And he would always yell at me, hey, get up here. I'm not waiting for you this time. You're going to have to walk back this time and all this other stuff. But he was hard on me, but at the same time, I needed that, really. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, me and him, we started running hard. He started doing half marathons, and I was like, man, I really want to do a half marathon now. But I never really did one until, I think high school. Mm-hmm. But I was doing crazy mileage with him, and I was doing Weight Watchers, and all of a sudden I lost, I think it was $105 at the end of 7th grade. Mm-hmm. So I wanted losing 80 pounds in a year because, I did Weight Watchers and I did all this stuff. But, just because my dad, started pushing me at a young age, I think it really helped.
Yeah, and something I specifically remember is the Springville Stampede shirts. And I think you always wrote your time on there in a Sharpie. And you could kind of see your progression to, I think I remember seeing 24 when we were in middle school. I don't know if that was when you ran it in 6th grade or not. And then, of course, your times came down over the years. And you did track briefly, from what I remember, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Just a little bit.
And then, so it was kind of me and you back and forth in middle school. So let's talk briefly about how intense middle school gym class was for us.
I mean, that was before, everybody thought you were tryhards in middle school. So I think we were the cream of the crop then, and we would go back at it. We both have competitive spirits, and that what kind of helps us, be the best what we are now. But we started going at it, my dad got me into writing times on shirts and stuff like that, and I think my first one was a 24-minute, 39 or something like that. And then, I don't know, one day, me and you started clicking, and then we started running, and it was like, man, I'm faster than you. I think that's what started it. Mm-hmm. It's like, man, I don't know what you're talking about. You're full of crap. I'll run faster than you any day. And then 7th grade, we started going at it, and then, obviously, I came through. And then 8th grade, I kind of settled off a little bit more into the football scene, but, you obviously pulled through in 8th grade. But,
yeah,
that's how it went.
But I just remember, there was a complete shift in attitude when it came from middle school to high school. We were straight tryhards in middle school. In high school, we would run the pacer test, and I would try to get the bare minimum. But in middle school, 8th grade year, I remember, I think I did 128 pacers. I'm dripping sweat, going to class dripping sweat, and it was kind of something we all did. We're actually going down till it was back then. It was 12th period, our little homeroom.
Yeah,
our little homeroom.
That's right.
And we would rerun the mile to try to beat each other's time, and whatnot. And it was just a stupid amount of effort. And it was obviously, some of it was for those little records that we had. I think there was we did the whole fitness gram stuff, and there was the pull-ups, the run, the pacer test, the shuttle run, all that crap. It was just it was fun. It was a lot of effort, but it was fun back in middle school. I remember gym class actually being fun versus what we got to when we got into high school.
Yeah, it was a little different vibe for sure. We definitely earned those hundreds back in middle school for sure.
Yeah, but so where did kind of running change for you? Was it that 8th grade year when you focused more on football? Because I don't remember you doing a whole lot of it in high school.
Yeah, I mean, I'd run here and there, but I stopped. I just dropped off after a while because I want to be big on football. I want to do all these other sports, and running distance wasn't really it for those sports. So I dropped off, unfortunately, and I thought I was going to be big on other sports, but I wound up dropping off on those before I could even be happy with it. But that's what it was.
Yeah. So where did these so-called putting off the wrong character moments happen for you? Something you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier. Was that kind of in high school, the later part of high school or whatnot?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it started 9th or 10th grade, and you know, how you get to high school, everybody changes, you know, you guys try to fit in, you gotta do all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I started, I don't know, you know, I started hanging out with some of the wrong people, or, you know, some of the right people that, you know, gave me vibes, but I would just put it off, you know. I would be in the mirror every day, you know, like, man, I'm some big jock, I'm some football star, and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to be, and, you know, I worked really hard for that, but I put off a lot of passions and loves that I had because, you know, it wasn't cool at the time, or all that other stuff. And a lot of people that I put off, you know, I wish I had.
Mm-hmm.
You know, looking back at it now, you know, obviously I'm 22 now, I'm a little bit more mature. I wish I could take it back, but, you know, it kind of made me who I am, you know, kind of realize, you know, you got to break down the layers. You got to look at yourself every day and be honest with yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to experience the lows to experience the highs. Um, what kind of, like, how did that affect you, like, mentally? Like, what kind of stuff did you put off? Like, all that. I kind of want to get a little deeper into that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I put off, obviously running, you know, I wanted to do a marathon for the longest time, you know. I got into that, you know, I wanted to follow, you know, my faith for the longest time, but every time I went back to high school, my faith would just be shattered because, you know, I tried to fit in with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, trying to fit in with different crews and stuff. And, you know, I put off, like, my character and my work ethic and, like, everything together, you know, it just all kind of, like, came together in high school and then kind of fell apart. You know, it all fell apart over the years, but I think the biggest breaking point was just this past year. You know, I was training up and, you know, I was doing everything and I was fitting in with the Army guys, just like in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to try it out for Special Forces because I thought that was the biggest thing ever. You know, I busted my butt for that for like 6 or 7 months, and then I get there and everybody there is better than me. It was 100% humbling. But I sat there and I was like, wow, I'm absolutely nothing, and I just worked as hard as I possibly could. And, you know, I told everybody I was going to pass, no problem. And I wound up failing, getting dropped, and, you know, that's when it kind of hit the depression mode and, you know, started to reevaluate myself and, you know, why I did what I did. And then it's like, man, like, a lot of people weren't talking. I wasn't talking to anybody. I've been, you know, been a lonely journey since then, but, you know, I started looking at myself in the mirror, you know, like, why am I like this? Why am I doing this? And I started building it back up slowly. You know, I'm still working on it, but
Mm-hmm.
I started writing things down. I started, you know, apologizing for my past. I started doing all this different stuff. And, you know, I'm slowly getting there, but, you know, it is definitely different. It's definitely a different vibe. I'm doing so much more stuff by myself. You know, I don't even realize that, you know, I'm alone half the time that I have to do this anyways, and it's time to go. You know, there's no switch on and off. You know, it's time to be a good person. It's time to, you know, lead by example instead of having my life be like up on the wire waiting for somebody to pick it up.
Yeah, that's incredible, man. Mental health is something that I personally want to talk about more on this podcast and through everything that I do, whether it's fishing, running, kind of along a similar lines. Um, Depression and anxiety is something that I have dealt with for a long time. And like you said, it's getting to the point where you look at yourself in the mirror, you're like, why do I feel this way? Like, it doesn't feel good at all. Like, it's terrible. Like, you feel like shit, like almost 24/7. And you just look at yourself and you're like, how the hell did I get to this point? And for me, you know, I felt like I kind of rode through a lot of the glory days in high school where you kind of make those jokes where, hey, like, I peaked in high school. So I had a pretty successful senior year running wise, like, wasn't the best, but that kind of sparked my decision to continue my running career. Um, in the college, reached out to the coach at the school I was going to. Started running cross country. Like, I had the best summer training ever since probably freshman year of high school, where I was running like 50 miles a week. And I get there 2 days in there, I basically break my foot. I step on a rock, get an inflamed bone. So I was out my entire freshman year of cross country track. And of course, there was a big mood change with that. I was coming off the high of senior year and good summer training. All of a sudden, I couldn't run anymore, and running had become my life pretty much over the last 6 years. I had some struggles, injuries in high school, but it became my life, and it got to the point where I completely exuberated myself into studying. I got 2 4.0s my freshman year of college, but basically I stopped talking to everybody. My roommate and I didn't get along halfway through the year. I'd go to the library for like 3 or 4 hours. Like I'd go to class and then I would go eat and I would go to the library, and that was my entire life. And then it came to the summertime, and I didn't have school anymore, and I just kind of remember I would sleep till like 1 o'clock. I'd stay up late doing absolutely nothing. I would just lay in my bed. And it got to the point where like my mom like stopped me. She pulled me aside. What's going on, Dad?
Got an 8 point.
Did you really?
Yep.
Oh, my dad just walked in. This is Greg Benstead's on the phone.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But basically, like it got to the point where I was just sleeping in, doing whatever, and my mom like pulled me aside and like she's like, you got issues. Like we got to work on this. And things got better temporarily, and kind of struggling with it again recently after some events in my personal life with girlfriends and whatnot. As I'm sure you can know how crazy women can be.
Very crazy, yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of makes me feel better that you kind of have a similar story. It's kind of horrible that you had to go through all that, and that we both had to go through all that, but just kind of it happens to everybody is kind of what I'm trying to get across. And it's not something to be ashamed of, in my opinion. And I know you're going to get back from it. I know I'm going to get back from it, and we'll go from there. And I think running is going to be a big part for both of us.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, it's probably the best therapy I think I've found. And, I've done some crazy stuff with running recently. I'll do some wild stuff, so I'll just be out of the average. And, nobody else will do it, so I'll do it. And, it makes me feel a little better on the inside more than it does the outside. But, it's definitely you don't know until you know. Like, you don't know you need to have a breakdown. You don't know that, like, the worst time in your life's going to come until, it comes. Until you're raw and authentic with yourself. Until you, truly put everything behind you. Like, you're going to be the same person. Nothing else is going to change. Sometimes you just got to break down. I believe, everybody's going to have that. And, mental health is a hard topic to talk about because nobody wants to be raw and authentic with themselves. And, this generation, everybody's putting on a front because they want likes, they want this, they want that, but they can't be them by themselves. They can't do all this other stuff, but,
Yeah,
I don't know, it's hard to, really exaggerate on, but.
Yeah, and so, like, kind of how for, obviously it's hard to let go of the past, but how do you go ahead and do that?
Oh, man, I wish I could tell you.
Exactly.
I don't know, man. I think when I lace up my shoes and go for a run and, I usually have a hoodie on every day.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what temperature it is, I have a hoodie, I got sunglasses on, or I got a hat on so, like, nobody can see me. And I would just be a blob running down the road. And, like, nobody will, like, understand why I do that. But it's more or less for me, for my mental set, that, nobody's going to see me. This is about me. It's not about you, I don't really want people noticing and going up on the street to me, hey, that's sweet that you run all the time. I mean, that's great and all, but it's for me, it's for my life. It's for my mental attitude too.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you don't see me, but this is me seeing myself.
Exactly, man. That's the way I see that.
Yeah, that's great. And same thing for me. For me, a lot of it has kind of been running to try to get back to the way that was before, like not physically or mentally, but just kind of, there was I think a point in my life where I was just through the roof happy, kind of things didn't really necessarily matter, and just kind of trying to get back to that attitude, more of a positive attitude on life and whatnot. But I do that through through my struggles is how Beyond the River came about. Fishing, running, have been my two biggest stress relievers. Um, Unfortunately, fishing isn't as super healthy as people will necessarily think physically. It's good for your mental health, but as far as physically, I eat a lot of junk food when I fish. Don't necessarily have the best sleeping habits, so kind of running and training has kind of grown out of that. I'm kind of pairing it with it to get the best of both worlds. So
Yeah, man, I definitely feel that for sure. You know, I can see it, and you know, obviously, you know, everybody has different therapy. I can't tell you it's not a code, it's not a program. You know, it's something that you just gotta, you know, find out about yourself. You know, what you're into. You know, what group you gotta be a part of, or you know, what's it gonna take to break you down.
And so, where out of all this did the decision come to go into the military? And before we get into that, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I know myself, I appreciate your service, and I know being in the armed forces, being a police officer, isn't necessarily the most politically correct thing these days, which is super sad. But I want you to know that I personally appreciate your service, and for everyone else out there serving the military, I do appreciate your service.
I definitely appreciate the support, man. You know, the military is something, you know, that's always been in the back of my mind, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And my dad kind of pushed me into the military, and, you know, I went with it. You know, what my dad said, you know, my dad's like, yeah, it's great. I didn't even know what I wanted when I went into the military. You know, I just went into the military. You know, I put in my best effort, and, you know, I wound up excelling and getting, like, a big award at the end of basic training. I was like, man, I might be good at this. This is cool. I got back home with reserves and stuff, and, you know, I was juggling jobs, and I was going to ETC at the time, and I was doing reserves at the time, and I was like, man, this really isn't it. I really don't feel like I have my niche right now. And it was up and down, you know, with, you know, my depression and all that stuff, and I thought the best thing at the time was to go ahead and go active. So it took a year and some change to go active duty, but, you know, I finally went to active duty. You know, they said, hey, where do you want to go? You have Fort Riley, Kansas, Fort Hood, Texas, or Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. So honestly, those three choices are probably the worst ones you could possibly get. You know, I picked Texas because, I don't know, Texas seems like a cool spot. And I got here. I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't know anybody. It kind of sucked because, you know, I was just a new guy trying to fit in. It was basically like high school again. And, you know, a month after I got to Texas, I deployed to Iraq, like, almost instantaneously. And that was a different vibe, too. I got to know the guys very well. And, you know, I really pushed myself, and I lifted weights a couple times over there every day. And I wound up getting a hernia and having to come back early from Iraq. And I was like, what the hell, what is this? And wound up being one of the best things that's happened to me, you know. My 21st birthday was in Iraq, but, you know, I came home, like, I think a month after my 21st birthday, I came home, got surgery, and then, you know, I went through the up and downs and all that stuff, trying to find myself there. And I got back into training, and I got back into running, I got all that stuff. That's when I went and said, you know, maybe I should go into Special Forces. And that's when I did do that. And, you know, I progressed pretty quickly with my military career, so, you know, I can't complain about that. I've had some great people in my life, but I've had some really awful people in my military career that, you know, I'm like, wow, why is that person in the Army? Why is that person in charge of me? But I think that's anywhere in life. You know, I've progressed, you know, okay, because I've had some great leaders, like, over me, you know. I made sergeant in under 3 years, so I can honestly say I'm happy with that, and I can honestly leave a mark here. So that's the biggest thing I like to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. Now I don't completely understand how the military works. So what is your commitment to it?
I have like 3. I think 2 years now.
Okay.
And you know, I have a year left after that, and then, you know, I'll be out, be starting to transition out. It's a little different. You know, they offer services to help you transition out. And people that say, you know, hey, man, I didn't get a job, the Army didn't help me, they're absolutely full of crap, because, you know, they're providing the resources right in front of you. You just got to take advantage of it. Like, they're making you go to class to better prepare yourself for jobs when you get out. So I can't complain about that either, you know. they're getting me my personal training certificate right now for free, and I'm doing a lot of training, but at the same time, you got to manage time, you got to do all this stuff extra.
So what's kind of at this point? Obviously you're still young, I'm still young, but what kind of is running through your head, thought process wise, that what kind of is your end goal at this point?
Currently the thought process is I'm probably gonna get out, and I want to go into firefighting or be a part of the Border Patrol dive teams, one of those. And I definitely want to move to Colorado or Utah. That's where I see myself, better training, because I really do want to win these ultras. I really do want to make a name for myself. Maybe get a couple sponsors so I can get my name out there bigger, and I can start making a bigger impact and live off of that. But hopefully next year, this time of year, I'll be moving to Colorado and training up for another ultra, training up to win these ultras finally, and settling down here.
I mean, it's crazy how fast everything happens. It feels like just yesterday we were those middle school kids running around the baseball field, the soccer fields, and now we're dealing with life.
Yeah, it comes at you fast for sure.
But so do you do any social media or anything regarding that when it comes to your running with anything?
Not really. I post something here and there. Hey, this is an update of where I'm at. This is what I want to do. But, I think it's more or less distracting right now because, I have people talking at work and people talking at home. Like, why do you want to do this? Like, they're always asking, like, why you want to do this? And then they always try to get, like, the best of me and, try to get me persuaded away from things, which that's why I don't like posting, like, all the time about this. I'd like to help people. But at the same time, I'd like to, distinguish myself first in the matter and say, here's where I'm at. This is what I'm going to do. And, nobody's really going to stop me from doing that.
So basically just abstaining from it so you can kind of focus on yourself and do your own thing.
Exactly, yeah. I just kind of taking a break from, most of the stuff. And I kind of got tired of hearing what people had to say or what they cared about the topic. I just stopped caring. And I'm like, I'm going to focus on myself. I'm going to focus on this training because I've just put my times elsewhere. I'm wasting my time just sitting here looking at comments because they don't feel like that I should do it. But.
Now, to what level do the comments get at you? I know I've had a fair number of comments just eat at me. Social media is honestly toxic to a degree. I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful for many things, but I think there's also a degree of it that's super toxic. And so kind of to what level are you able to block out those comments, or to what level does it affect you?
100%. It's like, I think it's a great platform. It could be a great platform, but at this time, a lot of the comments are pretty bad. At work, it's pretty bad because, they're like, why are you doing that on the weekend? Let's go drink, because, that's what I realized. I don't know why everybody likes to do that. They all like to go on the weekends and spend all their time and money on alcohol and doing all that stuff. I'm like, dude, I'm just going to chill by myself and go for a run or whatever. They look at me, they say I'm crazy and, why are you doing this? It's really stupid. Like, what's the point of running all that distance? Like, you're not proving anything to anybody. My family's like, man, you're hurt yourself. It ranges. I wish I could tell you specifically what they say, but it gets pretty raunchy sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and that's tough to hear, and I agree with you 100%. I personally don't drink myself. I don't personally understand it. In my opinion, you're basically taking a drug to, in other words, have a good time or have fun or be happy, and to me that just doesn't make sense. I want to be happy because I'm happy, not because I'm consuming this beverage or this drug or whatever. And personally, I just think, it makes you something you're not, and something I always want to be is authentic to who I am. And, because of that, I don't engage in that sort of activity personally.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you, man. I do not like to drink. I do not like to do all that stuff. And as sad as it is, that's what the college scene is, and the grown-up life can be. It's just them going to bars or doing all this stuff, really wasting my time, honestly.
Yeah, and to some degree, to some of those people, I think there's a certain level of sadness within them, which is why they have to resort to such actions. Like, I don't know how in depth to the college life you got, but towards like the end, towards the middle, at the end of my college career, like my first year, I wasn't exposed to it because I basically just put myself in the library 24/7 studying. But I kind of had a little bit more social life the next 2 years, and you really see some really shitty things that happen behind the scenes, and you gotta have some deep-seated personal issues to kind of engage in some of the behavior that's going on.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, I see that firsthand for sure. Even in the military, everybody wants to go out and like cheat on each other and one thing or another, do these drugs on the weekend, and then they wonder why they can't perform at their job. They wonder why they're not getting this promotion over their peers, and it's not. It gets. I have to be held back sometimes because I would love to speak my mind. I would love to stand up and be like, "This is not right. This is not what we need to do." But I'm not that level right now where I can say stuff like that. But deep down, I know what's right. I know what's wrong, and the environment that people give off and like to give off nowadays is not right for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think it'll always be that way. I think I struggle to think. I'll rephrase that just because I feel like things have gotten worse rather than better in recent years. But I think it'll turn around, and I think in the end, it's hard, especially when you're going through it. Kind of get into the attitude of the nice guy finishes last. And I think in many cases that's a very current situation, where I think I would consider both of us to be nice guys. And you talked about losing your faith in a degree, in middle school and whatnot, in high school. And it was kind of that nice guy finishes last mentality that kind of causes that switch. But I think in the long run, the nice guy ends up winning. I just think immediately we've both seen the effects of what that looks like in the present time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care whether a nice guy finishes last right now or not, because I know what group I want to be a part of. I know who I want to be. I don't really care where I finish in their eyes. I'm past that point of having them say, "Hey, you finished," like, "Hey, I got the job over you, haha, sucker." I could care less, man. I'm at the point right now where I want to be the best. I'm gonna push myself to be the best, and I'm not gonna care what anybody else says. What anybody else says or thinks.
Mm-hmm. Well, in even in the pursuit of being the best, if you necessarily don't achieve the best, you can be the best you possible. Kind of something that I always, through growing up, I always wanted to be a professional athlete. For the longest time, I wanted to be a professional football player. I wanted to be a professional skateboarder. And then I wanted to be an Olympic athlete, runner. And somewhere along the lines, I kind of came up with the whole I wanted to be a professor, a fisheries professor. And that was kind of something to appease my parents rather than something that I actually wanted to do. But just kind of along the lines, I realized that maybe I'm not the greatest athlete in the world. When it comes to running, like I'm 6'4", like I'm a little large to be a long distance runner. But in the end, I can still be the best that I can be and push myself to be, the best version of myself. Maybe not the best ever or the greatest of all time, the GOAT. But there's power in being the best you that you can be. And that's through athletics, physical health, mental health, and just being a fucking good person.
Yeah, exactly. I do think bad karma does exist. And, I'm going to do my part. I'm going to try to be the better person, the good Samaritan, whatever way it goes. But I'm going to try to stay golden here and, try to have faith in the future for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add to anyone? Any message you'd like to get across as we close up here?
Honestly, just keep the faith. Just keep pushing yourself no matter what. You know, as much as times seem like they suck and this generation is going downhill, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You can stand above the crowd, and you can be better than what you were. You know, it takes time, but, you know, definitely admit to people what's going on, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And there's power to admitting and being truthful who you are and to yourself and other people. Greg, I'm going to hold you on the line for a second just to, I'll talk to you off podcast. But that's going to do it for this episode. Great conversation, kind of a different conversation. I usually, obviously, talk about fishing. I'm going to kind of flip the script on Beyond the River. The whole point of the channel was never just to be about fishing. It kind of has grown in that direction. But the whole point of Beyond the River is the lessons learned through my life, through other people's lives, obviously, as we talked to Greg a little bit about his life. But just stay tuned for more of that kind of stuff, kind of more videos like this. You know, these are real honest conversations that we necessarily don't always have, but something that we definitely need to start having more of as, you know, society changes and mental health becomes more of a problem and there's more of these issues in today's world. But like I said, that's going to do it for this week's episode. I hope you guys all enjoyed.